A millionaire mocked and left his wife for her low-paying job. What she did next put him in disbelief. The city thrived beneath him, glittering like the treasure chest it had become under his command. Lucas Montgomery stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan penthouse, sipping a single malt scotch as he surveyed the skyline. The rhythmic pulse of New York was alive tonight. Car horns blared, people hurried through crosswalks, and distant sirens echoed between skyscrapers like background music. For Lucas, it was all a backdrop to his success. At 46, he had built one of the most formidable real estate and investment firms in the country, and tonight, like most nights, he felt invincible. His tailored navy blue suit hugged his athletic frame perfectly, the silk tie neatly knotted as always. His reflection stared back at him in the glass. A man who had worked his way from middle-class roots into luxury beyond comprehension. Yet, as the city sparkled before him, there was an itch beneath the surface of that triumph, something he couldn't quite ignore. The faint sound of footsteps reminded him that he wasn't alone. Turning slightly, he watched his wife, Claire, move gracefully across the room. Her steps were light, calculated, the kind that came from years of quietly navigating a world that wasn't always built for her success. Her fitted beige blouse tucked neatly into tailored pants, her dark brown hair swept into a simple ponytail. There was a calmness to her, but Lucas had learned long ago that Claire's calm wasn't always comforting. It was often an indication of thoughts she wasn't sharing. She carried a plate of roasted vegetables and salmon, setting it carefully on the dining table as the soft hum of classical music filled the air. Claire glanced up and caught him watching her, her hazel eyes scanning his expression as if searching for something buried under his polished exterior. "Dinner's ready," she said softly, but Lucas didn't move. Instead, he leaned against the windowsill, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "I'm not hungry," he replied, his tone distant, yet firm. Claire hesitated for a brief moment, then sat down at the table alone. The clinking of her fork against the plate was the only sound between them for the next few minutes, aside from the occasional hum of the city beyond. Lucas hated this silence, but he had grown used to it. Their marriage had slipped into a predictable routine over the years, one where he chased ambition and she managed the smaller, quieter parts of their life, like the family finances, organizing charity galas, and of course, running that cafe of hers. He often wondered why she held on to the cafe when she could be doing something far more prestigious. He had even tried to convince her once, pointing out how a woman of her intelligence could easily excel in any corporate setting. But Claire never took the bait. Instead, she simply smiled and said she liked what she did. Lucas never understood it and eventually stopped trying. "Are you still planning to attend the cafe's anniversary event tomorrow?" Claire asked, breaking the silence. Lucas exhaled slowly, setting his glass down on a nearby table. "Actually, I won't be able to make it. There's a gala I need to attend for the new development deal." He turned and met her gaze, expecting some sign of disappointment or irritation. Claire blinked once but didn't flinch. "I see. I'm bringing Taylor," Lucas added casually, almost as if it were an afterthought. "She's been handling the project, so it makes sense for her to be there." The flicker of something, maybe hurt, maybe resignation, crossed Claire's face, but it disappeared almost instantly. She nodded as she resumed eating, her demeanor as composed as ever. "If that's what you think is best." Lucas shifted uncomfortably, taken aback by how quickly she accepted the news. No arguments, no passive-aggressive remarks, just calm acceptance. That wasn't like her. Claire usually made her feelings known in subtle ways, but tonight, she was a fortress, impenetrable. "Are you sure you're okay with that?" he asked, almost hoping for a challenge. She looked up, her fork resting delicately on the edge of her plate. "Lucas, you've been doing what you think is best for years. I stopped questioning it a long time ago." There it was, the gentle jab he had been expecting, but even that lacked its usual sharpness. Lucas felt something twist in his chest, but he couldn't quite pinpoint whether it was guilt, irritation, or some blend of both. He stood abruptly, loosening his tie. "I have some work to finish before tomorrow. Don't wait up." Without waiting for her response, he left the dining room and headed to his study. The sound of Claire gathering the dishes followed him faintly before fading into the background. The glow of his computer screen illuminated the dark wood-paneled room as Lucas reviewed the latest financial projections. His assistant, Taylor Reed, had done a stellar job preparing the numbers. Young, ambitious, and eager to prove herself, Taylor was everything he thought Claire wasn't. Where Claire exercised caution and restraint, Taylor pushed boundaries and seized opportunities. It was refreshing, at least, that's what Lucas told himself. A notification pinged on his phone. It was a message from Taylor. Final touches on tomorrow's presentation. Let me know if you want to review together tonight. Lucas smiled to himself. Taylor's dedication was exactly what he needed. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, considering whether to invite her over to finalize the details, but something held him back. Instead, he typed a simple reply. Tomorrow is fine. Thanks. Meanwhile, Claire sat in their dimly lit bedroom, her back resting against the headboard as she scrolled through emails on her tablet. Her mind wasn't on her cafe or its anniversary event. Instead, she was rereading a message she had received earlier from David Palmer, the owner of a successful cafe chain and, once upon a time, the man she almost married. Let's meet. I think we can make this work. Claire bit her lip, weighing her options. Her job had always been her sanctuary, a place where she could escape Lucas's towering shadow. But this was more than just another cafe expansion plan. It was an opportunity to take back something she had lost without realizing it, her sense of purpose. With a deep breath, she tapped out a reply. I'm ready to discuss it. Let me know when. As she set the tablet aside, Claire glanced at the empty side of the bed where Lucas should have been. The hum of the city filled the quiet room, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel lonely. She felt free. Lucas, on the other hand, sat in his study, finishing the last of his scotch, oblivious to the shift that had already begun. The next morning, Lucas left early, his mind on the gala and the deal that would solidify his position further. Claire kissed him on the cheek as he left, her smile polite, but her mind was already somewhere else. As the door clicked shut, she returned to the kitchen and poured herself another cup of coffee. Today wasn't just about the cafe's anniversary, it was the start of something bigger, something Lucas wouldn't see coming. As Claire processes Lucas's decision to skip the cafe's anniversary for yet another business event, what would you do in her place? Would you stay quiet, or would you confront him? Let us know in the comments, give this story a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more. The gala was everything Lucas Montgomery expected. Extravagant, exclusive, and filled with the kind of people who thrived on their own self-importance. The ballroom at the Eastworth Hotel glittered under crystal chandeliers, and the air smelled of expensive perfume, cigars, and champagne. Wealth wasn't just present, it was flaunted, from tailored suits to diamond-studded heels that clicked against marble floors. Lucas thrived in places like this, where charm and power were the currency of the evening. But tonight, something felt off. Taylor Reed stood by his side, her long blonde hair cascading over her shoulders, a subtle but deliberate choice meant to draw attention. She wore a sleek black dress, the slit along the side just high enough to suggest ambition and seduction rolled into one. Lucas had always admired her ability to navigate these events with finesse, knowing when to flash a smile and when to lean in with just the right suggestion to close a deal. "Another successful night for you," she said, lifting her glass of champagne toward him in a silent toast. Lucas returned the gesture, the bubbles fizzing against his lips as he drank. "Not quite yet. We still have a few key investors to charm." Taylor smirked. "You'll manage. You always do." The compliment felt hollow tonight, though Lucas wasn't sure why. Normally, praise like that fed his ego, fueled his sense of invincibility. But as he scanned the room, his mind wandered, not to the investors or the contracts awaiting signatures, but to Claire. He remembered the way she had looked at him last night when he told her he wasn't coming to the cafe's anniversary event. The quiet acceptance in her eyes had gnawed at him all day. No accusations, no pleas for him to reconsider. Just that simple acknowledgement that he had once again chosen work over her. It should have been a relief. No drama, no guilt trips, but instead, it left him feeling unsettled. "Are you okay?" Taylor's voice pulled him back to the present. Lucas blinked, offering her a brief smile. Yeah, just thinking. She leaned in slightly, her perfume lingering in the air between them. About the deal? Of course, he lied. Across the room, the CEO of an influential development firm caught Lucas's attention, giving him a brief nod. Recognizing the opportunity, Lucas straightened his tie and motioned for Taylor to follow. They moved seamlessly through the crowd, weaving between conversations about mergers and luxury vacations. Taylor laughed at the right jokes, made the right comments about market trends, and when the time came, subtly passed Lucas a talking point to help him win the CEO's favor. By the end of the conversation, Lucas had secured a verbal agreement to partner on the next phase of his expansion. Taylor beamed, her fingers brushing his arm in what he assumed was a gesture of professional pride. But the satisfaction was fleeting. As the night wore on, Lucas realized the laughter, the champagne, and the compliments were failing to fill the void inside him. He excused himself to the balcony, the cool night air biting against his skin as he leaned against the railing and stared out at the city below. He pulled out his phone, instinctively scrolling through his contacts until he reached Claire's name. His thumb hovered over the call button. What would he even say? Sorry, Claire. I know I've missed another important moment in your life. The thought felt pathetic. She deserved more than a half-hearted apology given from a hotel balcony. Sighing, he slipped the phone back into his pocket and returned to the ballroom, determined to push her from his mind. Back at the penthouse, Claire wasn't thinking about Lucas. She sat at the kitchen island, her fingers wrapped around a warm cup of tea as she reread the email from David Palmer for the third time. I can arrange a meeting with potential investors if you're interested. Let me know if you're ready to take the next step. The words pulsed in her mind, each one carrying the weight of a choice she hadn't expected to face so soon. The cafe had always been her sanctuary, a place where she could breathe freely and create something meaningful outside of Lucas's shadow. But David's proposal wasn't about expanding her small corner cafe. It was about stepping onto a larger stage, one where she could compete in the same circles that Lucas believed belonged solely to him. She took a sip of tea, the warmth soothing her throat as her thoughts raced. The idea was exhilarating, but it wasn't without risk. Partnering with David meant putting herself in the public eye, opening herself to scrutiny, and possibly clashing with Lucas's business interests. But wasn't that the point? Claire set her cup down and reached for her phone. Her fingers trembled slightly as she composed her response. I'm ready. Let's meet tomorrow. She hit send before she could overthink it, her heart thudding in her chest. It felt like the beginning of something bigger than she could fully comprehend. The next morning, Lucas woke early, invigorated by the momentum from the gala. He dressed sharply in a gray suit, the fabric tailored to perfection, and headed to the kitchen for coffee. Claire was already there, her back to him as she prepared breakfast. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and buttered toast filled the air, but there was something different about the atmosphere. It felt heavier, as if both of them were holding on to words they weren't ready to share. Did you sleep well? Claire asked, her voice as calm as ever. Lucas poured himself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter. Barely. Busy night. I figured, she replied, turning to face him. She handed him a plate of eggs and toast, her gaze steady. You'll be leaving early today? He nodded, taking a bite of toast. Big meeting downtown. The investors from last night want to discuss next steps. Claire watched him, her expression unreadable. Sounds important. It is, he said, but the words felt mechanical. He didn't want to admit that the excitement he usually felt before such meetings was missing. What about you? Plans for the day? Claire set her plate down and wiped her hands on a kitchen towel. I'm meeting with a potential investor for the cafe. Lucas raised an eyebrow. An investor? Yes, she said simply, meeting his gaze. We're thinking of expanding. He was about to ask more, but something in her tone stopped him. There was a quiet finality to it, as if she didn't need his input or his approval. For the first time in a long while, Lucas felt the ground shift beneath him. He nodded, pretending to focus on his coffee as his thoughts spiraled. When he left the penthouse, Claire stood by the window, watching him disappear into the bustling morning traffic. She didn't feel the usual pang of sadness she used to whenever he walked away without a second glance. Today, she felt something different. Freedom. Claire Montgomery arrived at the boutique cafe in Tribeca 15 minutes early, just as the morning light reflected off the glass-fronted buildings, and the streets hummed with the steady rhythm of New York's early risers. She chose a seat in a quiet corner, her fingers wrapped around a porcelain cup of cappuccino, the foam perfectly swirled in a heart shape. But Claire barely noticed it. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, of possibilities, risks, and the precarious step she was about to take. The soft chime of the entrance bell pulled her from her reverie. Her heart skipped when she saw David Palmer walk in. He was taller than she remembered, his broad shoulders filling out a tailored navy blazer, his brown hair swept back casually, and that same easy charm lighting up his face. Time had been kind to him. Claire watched as he spotted her, a genuine smile spreading across his lips before he crossed the room. "Claire," he said, leaning down to kiss her cheek. His cologne was warm and familiar, like autumn leaves mixed with a hint of cedarwood. "You look incredible," she smiled, brushing off the compliment even as a blush crept into her cheeks. "And you haven't changed a bit," she replied, motioning for him to sit. Still the smooth talker. David chuckled, settling into the seat across from her. "Maybe a little, but I'd like to think I've gotten better at backing it up." There was a brief pause, the kind of silence that happens when two people who once knew each other well are trying to recalibrate after years apart. David broke it first, leaning forward with a curious glint in his eye. "So, you're finally ready to expand the cafe?" Claire stirred her coffee absent-mindedly. "I've been thinking about it for a while, but things at home made it complicated." David didn't need her to elaborate. He had heard whispers over the years, stories of Lucas Montgomery, the untouchable millionaire, and the woman who stood quietly in his shadow. "Lucas," he said knowingly. Claire sighed, her shoulders sinking slightly. "I'm not here to talk about him." "Good," David replied, "because you don't need him to make this work." His confidence was contagious, but Claire wasn't ready to let herself feel that just yet. "I know the cafe could do more," she admitted. "We have the potential, but I've been cautious." "Maybe too cautious." David nodded. "It's not caution, Claire. It's patience. You've built something authentic, and now you have the chance to take it to the next level." She studied him, trying to gauge whether his encouragement was purely professional or if there was something personal behind it. The way he looked at her, steady, warm, as though she were still the woman he had known back in college, made her chest tighten. "So, what does this expansion look like?" she asked, shifting the conversation back to safer territory. David reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. As he opened it, Claire noticed the meticulous organization, the highlighted sections, and the strategic maps of potential locations. He hadn't come to this meeting unprepared. "We start with 2 flagship locations in high-traffic areas," David explained, sliding a document toward her. "We target neighborhoods where there's room to compete with the big players, without losing the charm that makes your cafe unique. I'll help with the financing, and you'll run the operation as a partner, not just a manager." Claire blinked, momentarily overwhelmed by the scale of the proposal. It wasn't just an expansion. It was a leap into something far beyond what she had imagined. "This is ambitious." David leaned back, his gaze never leaving hers. "You've always been ambitious. You just forgot." Those words hit her harder than she expected. Claire thought about the years she had spent organizing charity events and keeping Lucas's life running smoothly, all while putting her dreams on hold. She had forgotten what it felt like to take risks for herself. Until now. Before she could overthink it, Claire nodded. "Let's do it." David's smile widened, and he extended his hand. "You won't regret this." As their hands clasped, Claire felt a spark, not just from the touch but from the promise of something new. Something hers. Meanwhile, Lucas sat in his office downtown, his back to the window as the city moved on without him. Taylor Reed stood near his desk, flipping through her tablet as she outlined the next phase of their development project. But Lucas wasn't listening. His mind kept replaying the brief conversation he'd had with Claire that morning, the calm confidence in her voice as she mentioned her meeting with an investor. It wasn't like Claire to be so vague. Usually, she shared details about her work freely, but today, she had been different, and it bothered him. "Lucas," Taylor's voice broke through his thoughts. She gave him a puzzled look. "Did you hear what I said?" "Yeah," he lied, sitting up straighter. "Expansion plans for the waterfront property. Go on." Taylor's eyes lingered on him for a moment, clearly unconvinced, but she continued. "I spoke with the zoning committee, and they're on board. But we'll need to secure the backing of 2 more investors before we can move forward." Lucas nodded, but his gaze drifted toward his phone. He contemplated sending Claire a message, asking how her meeting went, but then he shook his head. What was he doing? She had her world, and he had his. "Let's meet with the investors tomorrow," he said, standing and adjusting his cufflinks. "I'll handle the negotiations personally." Taylor smiled, clearly pleased with his renewed focus. "Sounds good. I'll set it up." As she left the office, Lucas exhaled slowly. His instincts told him that whatever Claire was working on wasn't as harmless as she made it seem. But for now, he had bigger problems to deal with, or so he told himself. Later that evening, Claire sat at her kitchen table, her laptop glowing softly as she finalized the details from her meeting with David. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, each click bringing her closer to the vision she hadn't dared to dream until now. She glanced at the time. Lucas would be home soon, but she felt no rush to finish. For once, she wasn't bending her schedule around his. When the front door opened, she heard the familiar sound of his shoes against the marble floor. "Claire," he called, his voice carrying through the quiet apartment. "In the kitchen," she replied, not looking up as he entered. Lucas loosened his tie and leaned against the doorway, watching her work. "You're busy," he observed. She nodded, her focus still on the screen. "I had a productive meeting today." "With your investor?"
"Yes."
She closed the laptop and finally looked at him. "It went well." Lucas hesitated, searching her face for any signs of what she was hiding. But Claire's expression was serene, giving nothing away. "That's good," he said, though the words felt hollow. He stepped closer, placing a hand on the back of her chair. "If you need advice on anything, you know you can ask me." "I know," Claire replied, her tone polite but distant. "But I think I have it under control." Lucas pulled back, the subtle sting of her words settling in his chest. "I'm sure you do." He left the kitchen without another word, heading to the study where he would drown himself in spreadsheets and projections. But as he closed the door behind him, he couldn't shake the feeling that Claire's world was shifting and that he was no longer part of it. Claire, meanwhile, leaned back in her chair and smiled softly. She wasn't just building a business. She was reclaiming her life. The boardroom hummed with anticipation as Lucas Montgomery entered, flanked by Taylor Reed and his financial advisor, Mark Brennan. The long mahogany table gleamed under the dim overhead lights, and the air smelled of fresh leather and crisp paper. A room designed for powerful decisions and monumental deals. Lucas thrived in settings like this. His polished appearance, commanding voice, and calculated charm had always been enough to steer any meeting in his favor. But today, something felt off. The murmurs among the executives weren't the usual small talk about weekend getaways or yacht parties. Instead, they were subdued, their eyes flickering toward him with subtle curiosity. Lucas placed his leather briefcase on the table and adjusted his tie, pretending not to notice. Taylor leaned in, whispering, "You've got this. Stick to the numbers and they'll follow." Lucas nodded, but her words provided little comfort. His mind had been restless since Claire's cryptic comment about her investor meeting days ago. He had tried to dismiss it, but her confidence haunted him. Something had shifted in their dynamic. He just couldn't figure out how or why. As the meeting began, Lucas presented his vision for the waterfront development, his voice smooth and persuasive. Taylor clicked through the PowerPoint slides, displaying promising projections and aggressive timelines. Investors nodded in approval at first, but halfway through the presentation, the atmosphere soured. A man with silver hair and sharp eyes, Harold Green, leaned forward and cleared his throat. "Lucas, these projections assume market stability, but what's your plan if the market shifts?" Lucas straightened. "We've accounted for fluctuations." "Taylor, can you pull up the sensitivity analysis?" Taylor tapped a few keys, but the screen flickered. She hesitated, mumbling something under her breath before the correct slide appeared. Green's brow remained furrowed. I'm not seeing sufficient contingency planning here. What's the fallback if interest rates spike or construction delays occur? Lucas's jaw tightened. This wasn't the first time Green had challenged him, but today, his patience wore thinner than usual. Our financing model is flexible enough to handle shifts, Lucas replied, keeping his tone measured. We're working closely with suppliers to minimize delays. Green exchanged a glance with another board member, a woman in her mid-50s with a reputation for scrutinizing deals to death. Respectfully, Lucas, flexibility isn't a plan. It's a gamble. And given the recent rise of boutique competitors, Lucas's ears perked up. Boutique competitors? What competitors are you referring to? He interrupted. The woman's lips curved slightly, as if she had been waiting for him to ask. Palmer's Cafe Group. They've been making quiet but strategic moves, securing prime locations near major business hubs. Their expansion has been impressive. Lucas's heart skipped. Palmer. The name hit him like a punch to the gut. He managed to keep his composure, but beneath the surface, his mind raced. Was this connected to Claire's investor meeting? I'll look into it, Lucas said smoothly, shifting the conversation back to the project. But as the meeting dragged on, he could feel the momentum slipping away. The board members left the room with polite handshakes and promises to revisit the proposal, which he knew was code for skepticism. Once they were alone, Taylor closed her laptop with more force than necessary. They're being cautious, she said, trying to sound optimistic. We can tweak the proposal. Lucas ran a hand through his hair, his gaze fixed on the empty seats. It's not the proposal that's the problem. It's Palmer. Taylor tilted her head. David Palmer? The cafe guy? Yeah, Lucas muttered, already pulling out his phone to do some research. He scrolled through articles, his jaw tightening as he saw headlines praising Palmer's expansion. But what really set his blood boiling was Claire's name, mentioned in several pieces as a key strategist behind the growth. One article even described her as the visionary co-leader driving Palmer's success. Lucas felt like the ground had shifted beneath him. He had always viewed Claire's cafe as a side project, something to keep her busy while he handled real business. Now, it seemed she had built something far more formidable without him even noticing. Taylor, he said, his voice clipped. Find out everything you can about Palmer's expansion and Claire's involvement. I want a report by tomorrow. Taylor hesitated, clearly sensing his agitation. Are you sure that's necessary? Claire's, do it. Lucas snapped, cutting her off. I don't like being blindsided. Meanwhile, across town, Claire sat in a sunlit conference room at one of David Palmer's flagship locations. The large windows overlooked a bustling street, where pedestrians sipped coffee from to-go cups bearing the cafe's signature logo. Claire smiled, knowing that logo was beginning to pop up in more places than she had imagined. David entered the room, his tie loosened and a grin on his face. You killed it, he said, dropping a stack of signed contracts onto the table. Claire exhaled, the weight of the past few weeks finally lifting. The investor meeting had gone better than expected, and they had secured funding to open 3 more locations in prime spots, including one just a few blocks from one of Lucas's properties. We did it, Claire corrected, leaning back in her chair. But there's still a lot to finalize. David walked over, placing a hand on her shoulder. I knew you'd be good at this, but you've exceeded my expectations. There was warmth in his voice, but Claire sensed something more beneath it. She quickly shifted gears, pulling out her tablet to review their next steps. I'll handle the lease negotiations, she said, avoiding the emotional undertones. We need to move fast before competitors catch wind. David didn't push the conversation further, but Claire could feel his eyes on her as she worked. She knew their history complicated things, but right now, she needed to stay focused on the business. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Lucas. We need to talk tonight. Don't cancel. Claire stared at the message, her mind running through scenarios. Did he know about her role with Palmer's expansion? Was this the moment when everything would come crashing down? Taking a deep breath, she responded, I'll be home by 7. That evening, Claire walked into the penthouse, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. The smell of roasted chicken wafted from the kitchen, a rare gesture from Lucas, who usually preferred ordering takeout when he was home late. She set her bag down and found him at the dining table, 2 plates already served. "This is unexpected," she said, taking a seat. Lucas poured them both glasses of wine. "I thought we could have a nice dinner before we get into it." Claire sipped her wine, her stomach nodding with anticipation. "Before we get into what?" He didn't waste time. "Palmer's expansion. I know you're involved." Claire set her glass down gently, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I didn't think it would take you this long to figure it out." Lucas's jaw tightened, but he remained composed. "How long have you been working with him?" "Since the cafe's anniversary," she replied. "It started as a small collaboration, but it grew." Lucas leaned back, the weight of her words settling in. "Why didn't you tell me?" Claire's expression softened, but her voice remained firm. "Because you would have dismissed it like you always do. You never saw my work as important." "That's not true," Lucas said defensively, though even as he spoke, he knew it was a lie. "It is," Claire replied, her voice unwavering. "But that's okay, because I stopped needing your validation." The silence between them was deafening. Lucas stared at his plate, the meal he had prepared suddenly unappetizing. "I'm not trying to ruin you," Claire added softly, "but I'm not going to hold myself back either." Lucas nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. For the first time in years, he realized he didn't know the woman sitting across from him, and that terrified him. The hum of voices filled the cafe's flagship location on Madison Avenue, a bustling symbol of its rapid success. Business professionals crowded the marble-top tables, their laptops and coffee cups scattered like war supplies as they worked through meetings and presentations. The sound of the espresso machine whirring behind the counter blended seamlessly with the soft jazz playing in the background. It wasn't just a cafe anymore. It was a brand, and at the heart of it all was Claire Montgomery. Dressed in a tailored white blazer and slim black pants, Claire moved through the space with quiet authority. She stopped occasionally to chat with employees, asking about their day or checking on inventory levels. Her presence was magnetic, but it wasn't forced. She belonged here. Every smile from her staff, every nod of acknowledgement from customers, it all affirmed what she already knew. This was hers. "Claire." A voice called from the corner near the register. David Palmer waved her over, holding 2 cups of coffee. He was leaning against the counter, his shirt sleeves rolled up just enough to reveal the hint of a tattoo on his forearm. Claire had always thought that detail about him was oddly charming, rebellious yet controlled. "Morning," she said as she approached, accepting one of the cups. "Everything running smoothly?" David sipped his coffee, his eyes scanning the cafe with quiet satisfaction. "Better than we could have hoped. The new location on Park Avenue is almost ready to open, and the marketing team's projecting a 20% revenue increase for the next quarter." Claire raised an eyebrow, impressed. "That's ambitious." "We're ambitious," David replied with a grin. "And you're the reason we're pulling it off." She smiled, but there was a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. It wasn't that she doubted her capabilities anymore. Those doubts had been buried weeks ago, but the weight of what she was building and the shadow of her husband's looming realization weighed on her. David noticed her shift in mood and leaned in slightly. "You don't have to be modest, Claire. You've built this with me. This is as much yours as it is mine." She stared down at her coffee, swirling the foam with her spoon. "Lucas knows," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. David's expression hardened. "How did he take it?" Claire sighed. "He didn't yell or accuse me of betrayal, but I could see it in his eyes. He's hurt." David shook his head. "You're not responsible for his feelings. You've been holding yourself back for too long." "I know," Claire replied, looking out the large window as pedestrians rushed by, oblivious to the storm brewing in her personal life. "But it's complicated." David hesitated before placing a hand on her arm, his touch warm and grounding. "If he didn't see your worth before, that's his problem, not yours." Before she could respond, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a message from Lucas. "We need to talk tonight." Her stomach twisted, but she responded with a simple, "Okay." That evening, Claire returned to the penthouse, the tension in her chest building with each step she took through the door. The apartment was dimly lit, and the faint aroma of dinner hung in the air. Lucas sat on the couch, a half-empty glass of whiskey in his hand. His tie loosened and his shirt wrinkled from a long day. "You're home early," Claire said, setting her bag down by the door. Lucas looked up, his expression unreadable. "I figured we should have this conversation sooner rather than later." Claire's pulse quickened, but she nodded, moving to sit across from him. "Okay, let's talk." He swirled the whiskey in his glass, staring at it as if it held the answers he couldn't find. "Why didn't you tell me about Palmer's expansion?" "I didn't think you'd understand," Claire replied honestly. "Every time I tried to talk to you about the cafe, you brushed it off. It was just Claire's little hobby, remember?" Lucas flinched, the weight of her words hitting him harder than he expected. He downed the rest of the whiskey and set the glass on the coffee table. "I didn't mean to make you feel that way, but you did," she said softly. "And that's why I kept it from you. Because I knew you wouldn't see this as something important." Lucas ran a hand through his hair, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "So, what now? You and Palmer build an empire and leave me out of it?" Claire shook her head. "This isn't about leaving you out. It's about me stepping into something I've always been capable of doing." Silence settled between them like a heavy fog. Lucas leaned back, his gaze drifting toward the large windows where the city lights twinkled against the night sky. "I thought I was giving you everything you needed." Claire smiled sadly. "You gave me security, Lucas. But I needed more than that. I needed to be seen." His throat tightened, and for a moment, he couldn't speak. He had spent years believing that providing Claire with a luxurious life was enough. But now he realized how wrong he had been. She hadn't wanted material things. She had wanted acknowledgement, partnership, respect. "Do you still want this life with me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Claire hesitated. "I don't know, Lucas. For the first time, I feel like I'm in control of my own life. I'm not sure if going back to the way things were is possible." Her words hung between them, fragile yet final. Lucas stood, pacing the length of the room before turning back to face her. "Then let me be part of your world. Let me support you, even if it's not the way it used to be." Claire looked up at him, searching his eyes for sincerity. "I don't want empty promises." "It's not a promise," Lucas said, his tone resolute. "It's a decision." Her heart ached with conflicting emotions, love, regret, and the overwhelming urge to protect what she had built. But there was something in Lucas's eyes she hadn't seen in years: humility. For once, he wasn't trying to control the situation. He was trying to understand it. "I'll think about it," she said finally, standing up and brushing past him on her way to the bedroom. Lucas watched her go, his mind racing with thoughts of what he had lost and what he could still salvage. He poured himself another drink and sank back onto the couch, wondering if this was the beginning of the end or the start of something new. The next morning, Claire arrived at David's office, her thoughts still tangled from the conversation with Lucas. David greeted her with his usual charm, but he quickly noticed her distraction. "Everything okay?" he asked, closing the door behind them. Claire exhaled, setting her bag on the chair. "Lucas knows everything. We talked last night." David's jaw tensed. "And he wants to be part of this," Claire said, shaking her head as if the idea itself was impossible. "But I don't know if it's too late." David sat across from her, leaning forward with a serious expression. "You don't owe him anything, Claire. You've worked hard to get here." "I know," she replied, "but part of me still feels guilty." "Don't," David said firmly. "You've earned this, and no one, not even Lucas, should make you feel otherwise." Claire nodded, appreciating his support, but deep down, she knew this decision wasn't just about guilt. It was about figuring out who she wanted to be and who she wanted to have by her side when she finally arrived. The silence in Lucas Montgomery's office was deafening. Even the hum of the air conditioning felt distant as he sat at his desk, staring at the financial report Taylor had just handed him. His fingers tapped rhythmically on the sleek glass surface, the only outward sign of the storm brewing inside him. Each line of the report confirmed his worst fear. Palmer's Cafe Group wasn't just expanding, they were dominating. And at the heart of it all was his wife. Taylor shifted in her seat, crossing her legs and leaning forward slightly. "We've done the research," she said cautiously. "Claire isn't just a small player in Palmer's growth. She's running major parts of the operation, securing locations, negotiating contracts, and setting up strategic partnerships. Lucas clenched his jaw, his eyes locked on Claire's name in the report. He could almost see her in those negotiation rooms, calm and composed, the same way she had been when she orchestrated charity galas or handled their household affairs. But now, that quiet precision was being used to build an empire he hadn't even known existed. How did I miss this? Lucas muttered, more to himself than to Taylor. Taylor hesitated, carefully choosing her words. Claire's always been under the radar, Lucas. You didn't think she wanted more, so you didn't see it. Lucas flinched, her words cutting deeper than he expected. It wasn't just about what Claire had accomplished. It was about the fact that she had done it without him. He had built his empire assuming she would always be there, supporting him from the sidelines. But now, she wasn't just part of the game. She was winning it. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. What's the fallout if Palmer's expansion continues at this rate? Taylor scrolled through her tablet, pulling up a series of charts. If they secure the upcoming lease agreements, they'll be in direct competition with 2 of your properties. One of those locations, on Madison Avenue, was supposed to be our flagship retail development. Lucas's stomach twisted. That location had been part of his long-term vision for dominating the high-end retail market. Losing it to Palmer would be more than just a financial hit. It would be a public embarrassment. What about the investors? Lucas asked, his voice tight. They're watching, Taylor replied. A few of them have already expressed concern that we're overstretching ourselves. Lucas exhaled sharply, standing and walking to the large window overlooking the city. The skyline stretched endlessly before him, the buildings glittering like trophies of ambition. But now, those trophies felt fragile, as if they could crumble at any moment. Set up a meeting with the investors, Lucas said, turning back to Taylor. We need to reassure them that we're still in control. Taylor nodded and gathered her things. But before she left, she paused at the door. Lucas, are you sure you want to go head-to-head with Claire on this? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared at the report again, his thoughts a chaotic mix of pride, betrayal, and something he couldn't quite name. I don't have a choice, he finally said. But deep down, he knew that wasn't entirely true. Across town, Claire sat in a sunlit conference room at Palmer's headquarters, reviewing the latest projections with David. The charts showed a steady upward trend, confirming that their recent expansion efforts were paying off. But Claire's mind wasn't fully present. The conversation with Lucas the night before lingered in the back of her mind like an unfinished chapter. Earth to Claire, David said, waving a hand in front of her face. She blinked, offering an apologetic smile. Sorry, just a lot on my mind. David leaned back in his chair, his brow furrowed. Lucas. Claire nodded. He knows everything now, and he wants to be part of my world. David's expression darkened slightly. And do you want that? Claire hesitated, tapping her pen against the table. I don't know. Part of me feels like he's only doing this because he realizes what he's losing. Maybe, David replied, his tone measured. Or maybe he's starting to understand your worth. She appreciated David's support, but she knew this wasn't a decision she could make lightly. Lucas had always been a force of nature, charming, driven, and at times, overwhelming. But their marriage had been built on imbalance, and now that she had found her footing, she wasn't sure if they could ever truly be equals. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced at the screen. It was an email from one of the major investors they had secured during their last round of meetings. The subject line read, "Exciting partnership opportunity." Claire smiled, grateful for the distraction. She opened the email and scanned the details, her heart racing as she realized the potential impact of the proposal. If they could secure this partnership, it would cement their dominance in the market and leave Lucas scrambling to catch up. Good news? David asked, noticing the shift in her demeanor. Potentially great news, Claire replied. I need to follow up on this immediately. David nodded. Go get it. I'll handle the prep for tomorrow's meeting. Claire stood, gathering her things. Thanks, David. I'll keep you updated. As she left the building, the late afternoon sun cast a warm glow over the city, but Claire felt anything but calm. The path ahead was clear, but that didn't make it any less daunting. That evening, Lucas paced the living room of the penthouse, his thoughts spiraling as he waited for Claire to come home. The clinking of ice against glass echoed through the room as he nursed another drink, his mind replaying every conversation they had shared over the past few months. How had he been so blind to her ambitions? And why did it feel like her success was slipping through his fingers? When the door finally opened, Claire stepped inside, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. She set her bag down and met Lucas's gaze, her expression calm but guarded. "You've been waiting," she said, noting the drink in his hand. "We need to talk," Lucas replied, setting the glass on the table. Claire sighed, slipping off her blazer and draping it over a chair. "I figured." Lucas didn't waste time. "Why didn't you tell me about the investors you secured? About the partnership you're working on now?" Claire crossed her arms, leaning against the kitchen island. "Because, Lucas, I didn't want to be talked out of it." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration boiling over. "You really think I would have stopped you? You've done it before," Claire said, her voice firm. "You've dismissed my ideas, brushed off my concerns. I didn't want to fight for permission this time." Lucas's chest tightened. "I'm not the same person I was then." "Maybe," Claire admitted. "But that doesn't change the fact that I needed to do this on my own." He took a step closer, his gaze searching hers. "What if I want to be part of it now?" Claire's heart ached at the vulnerability in his voice. She had spent years wishing for this moment, wishing he would see her as more than just the woman behind the scenes. But now that he was offering, she wasn't sure if she could accept it. "I don't know if we can go back," she said softly. Lucas's shoulders sagged, the weight of her words crushing him, but he nodded, accepting the truth even though it hurt. "Then let me at least fix what I can." Claire blinked, surprised. "What do you mean?" He straightened, a glimmer of determination returning to his eyes. "You're right, I underestimated you. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that I'm not afraid of competition. If this is a game of strategy, then I want to play it with you, not against you." Claire studied him for a long moment before nodding. "We'll see, Lucas. But for now, I need to keep moving forward." "I wouldn't expect anything less," he replied, offering a small, bittersweet smile. As Claire walked toward the bedroom, Lucas stood in the dimly lit living room, wondering if this was his chance to rebuild, or if he had already lost her for good. Lucas Montgomery stood at the window of his office, hands shoved into the pockets of his tailored suit, as he watched the rain trickle down the glass. The gray clouds overhead mirrored his mood, brooding, unsettled, and full of suppressed tension. Below him, the city carried on as if nothing was wrong, but inside Lucas's world, everything was beginning to unravel. The latest reports from his development firm confirmed what he had feared. Several key investors had backed out of the waterfront project. Just weeks ago, this had been his crowning achievement, a project that was meant to solidify his control over high-end retail spaces in the city. Now, the cracks in the foundation were too large to ignore, and the name at the center of those cracks was painfully familiar. Claire, the woman he had once believed would always orbit around his life, content to let him be the star, had now become his greatest competitor. And she was winning. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Taylor Reed entered, her blonde hair neatly pulled into a bun, a leather-bound portfolio tucked under her arm. "I just got off the phone with the investors," she said, closing the door behind her. "It's worse than we thought. They're not just pulling back on this project. They're shifting their investments to Palmer's Cafe Group." Lucas's jaw tightened, his fingers curling into fists. "How much have we lost?" Taylor flipped open the portfolio, scanning the numbers. "At least 20% of our expected capital. More if Palmer secures those last few leases." Lucas exhaled sharply and turned away from the window. "And Claire? What's her role in this?" Taylor hesitated, as if debating how much truth Lucas could handle. "She's been the one orchestrating their property acquisitions. Every location they've secured was handpicked by her. It's smart. She's targeting areas where your developments haven't fully matured yet." Lucas sat down, leaning forward with his elbows on the desk. His mind raced, but no matter how many angles he considered, the result was the same. Claire had outmaneuvered him. The thought was infuriating, But more than that, it was humbling. "Set up a meeting with the investors," he said finally. "I need to talk to them directly." Taylor's lips pressed into a thin line. "I already tried. They're not interested in another meeting." Lucas slammed his hand against the desk, the sound echoing through the room. "They can't just walk away." "They can, and they are," Taylor replied, her voice softer now. "Lucas, they've seen the momentum Claire and Palmer have. To them, you're the riskier bet." For a moment, Lucas didn't respond. His mind flashed back to the night Claire had calmly told him she didn't need his permission to succeed. She had been right, of course. He had underestimated her for years, and now he was paying the price. "Thanks, Taylor," he said, dismissing her with a wave. "I'll figure it out." Taylor lingered for a second before nodding and leaving the office. Once alone, Lucas leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. His mind swirled with memories. Dinners where Claire had tried to talk to him about her plans. Mornings where she had hinted at wanting more. He had always brushed her off, assuming she was content with the life he had provided. He had been wrong. At the same time, Claire sat in a sleek black car parked outside a luxury hotel, her fingers drumming lightly on the leather seat as she waited for the press conference to begin. David Palmer sat beside her, scrolling through his phone with a satisfied smirk. "You're quiet," David said, glancing at her. Claire shrugged, her gaze fixed on the rain-soaked street. "Just thinking. About Lucas?" Claire didn't answer right away. "Part of me feels like this is the moment I've been working toward. But it's also complicated." David set his phone down and turned to face her fully. "You don't owe him anything, Claire. You've earned this." "I know," she replied softly, "but that doesn't make it easier." Before David could respond, the driver opened the door, and the sound of clicking cameras and muffled voices filled the air. Claire adjusted the collar of her white blazer and stepped out into the chaos, David following close behind. The conference room was filled with reporters, photographers, and investors, all eager to witness the next major announcement from Palmer's Cafe Group. Claire's heart pounded as she took her seat at the front table, the bright lights overhead making the room feel both claustrophobic and electric. David leaned toward the microphone, flashing his signature grin. "Thank you all for joining us today. We're excited to announce the next phase of our expansion, including 3 new flagship locations in key areas of the city." Applause rippled through the room, but Claire barely heard it. She was focused on the moment, on what this announcement meant, not just for the company but for her. David gestured toward her. "And none of this would have been possible without the brilliant work of my business partner, Claire Montgomery." Claire smiled as the cameras flashed, but inside, her emotions were tangled. This wasn't just a professional victory, it was a personal one. But as much as she wanted to revel in it, she couldn't shake the thought of Lucas and the fallout this would cause. Lucas was sitting at the bar in his penthouse, a half-empty bottle of bourbon in front of him, when his phone buzzed with a notification. He picked it up and saw the headline from a business news outlet. "Palmer's Cafe Group announces major expansion. Claire Montgomery leads the charge." The accompanying photo showed Claire, poised and confident, standing beside David Palmer as they addressed the media. She looked radiant, her smile a mix of pride and determination. Lucas felt a sharp pang in his chest, not just from the professional blow, but from the realization that he had never seen her smile like that for him. He set the phone down and poured himself another drink. But the alcohol did little to numb the ache. For years, he had been the one standing in the spotlight, basking in the glory of his achievements. Now, Claire was the one everyone was talking about, and Lucas was left wondering how he had let this happen. His thoughts were interrupted by another notification. This time, it was a message from Claire. "We need to talk." Lucas stared at the message, his mind racing. He knew what this conversation would be about. It had been coming for weeks, maybe even years. But he wasn't ready to let go of the life they had built, even if it meant facing the harsh truths he had avoided for so long. He typed a response, "Come home. I'll be waiting." That evening, as Claire walked through the door of the penthouse, the tension was palpable. Lucas stood by the window, his silhouette outlined by the city lights. He turned to face her, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger, regret, and something Claire couldn't quite identify. "Congratulations," he said, his voice devoid of sarcasm. You won, Claire sighed, setting her bag down. This wasn't about winning, Lucas. Wasn't it? He asked, taking a step toward her. You've built an empire, Claire. You've proven you don't need me. So, where does that leave us? She swallowed the lump in her throat. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Lucas exhaled, running a hand through his hair. I don't want to lose you. Claire's heart ached at the vulnerability in his voice. I don't want to lose myself. The silence between them was heavy, but it wasn't final. They weren't the same people they had been when they married. The question now was whether they could find a way to move forward, together or apart. I'm willing to try, Lucas said softly. But you have to let me in. Claire nodded, tears threatening to spill. I'll try to. For the first time in years, they weren't speaking as husband and wife bound by routine. They were speaking as two people trying to understand each other. And that, Claire thought, was a start. The rain had stopped by the time Claire Montgomery stepped out of the sleek black car and onto the cobblestone driveway leading to her cafe's first flagship location. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the faint smell of wet pavement and freshly brewed coffee from the cafe behind her. She took a deep breath, savoring the moment. This wasn't just another day at work. This was the culmination of years of patience, sacrifice, and quiet determination. Today, everything would come full circle. She adjusted the collar of her cream-colored trench coat and glanced up at the grand building. The cafe's new signage gleamed under the early morning light, a symbol of the empire she had helped build. With every step, her heels echoed against the pavement, matching the steady beat of her heart. She could already hear the faint hum of activity inside as the morning crowd trickled in, ready to start their day with a cup of coffee and a slice of something warm and familiar. But Claire wasn't here for coffee. She was here to meet Lucas. He had asked for this meeting, one final conversation before the inevitable happened. Claire wasn't sure what he expected to gain, but she had agreed. Maybe she owed him that much. As she entered the cafe, the smell of roasted beans and baked goods enveloped her, wrapping her in a comforting embrace. The space was bright and inviting, with exposed brick walls, wooden tables, and the soft glow of Edison bulbs hanging overhead. It was a reflection of her vision, her aesthetic. Everything about this place whispered her name, and for once, she was proud to claim it. She spotted Lucas at a table near the window, his dark suit tailored perfectly, but his posture revealing the weariness he carried. He was nursing a cup of coffee, but the way he stirred it absently made it clear he wasn't here to savor the taste. Claire approached, her presence drawing his attention immediately. He stood as she reached the table, offering a faint smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Thanks for coming, Lucas said, pulling out a chair for her. Claire sat down, crossing her legs and folding her hands neatly in her lap. You said it was important, Lucas sighed, running a hand through his hair before sitting down across from her. For a moment, he didn't speak. He simply studied her, as if trying to memorize the features of a woman he had only just begun to understand. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he finally said, his voice low and deliberate. About us. About everything. Claire nodded, waiting for him to continue. I spent years believing that what I was building would be enough for both of us, Lucas admitted. I thought if I gave you a good life, a stable life, you'd be happy. I know, Claire replied softly, but stability wasn't what I needed. Lucas exhaled, leaning back in his chair. I see that now, but what I don't understand is how I missed it. How did I not see what you were capable of? How did I let you slip away without even noticing? There it was, the vulnerability, the regret that had been simmering beneath the surface for weeks. It tugged at Claire's heart, but she didn't let it consume her. She had come too far to lose herself again. You didn't let me slip away, Lucas, she said gently. I chose to step away. There's a difference. He nodded slowly, absorbing her words like a man who had been handed a map after years of wandering blindly. I should have seen it coming, he murmured. You were always there, right in front of me, and I didn't pay attention. You were focused on your world, Claire replied. And I don't blame you for that. But I couldn't keep waiting for you to notice me. I had to notice myself first. The weight of her words settled between them, heavy but honest. Lucas sipped his coffee, his fingers tightening around the cup as he processed the truth he had avoided for so long. "And now you're part of something bigger," he said, his tone a mixture of admiration and sadness. "Palmer's Cafe Group is everywhere. Investors are pulling out of my projects because of you." Claire tilted her head slightly, her gaze steady. "I didn't do it to hurt you." "I know," Lucas replied, "but it still hurts." The silence that followed was filled with memories of late nights spent planning charity events, mornings where Claire had quietly cleaned up after Lucas's whirlwind lifestyle, and years of missed opportunities to see each other for who they really were. It wasn't anger or resentment that lingered now. It was grief. "I'm proud of you," Lucas said, breaking the silence. His voice cracked slightly, betraying the emotions he had tried to suppress. "I know I didn't show it before, but I am." Claire's breath hitched, and for the first time in weeks, her composure wavered. "Thank you," she whispered. Lucas reached across the table, his fingers brushing against hers. "Is there any way to fix this?" Claire hesitated, her heart torn between the man she had loved and the woman she had become. "I don't know if we can go back to what we were," she admitted, "but maybe that's a good thing." Lucas pulled his hand back slowly, nodding in understanding. "Then where do we go from here?" Claire looked out the window, watching as pedestrians hurried by, umbrellas in hand and briefcases swinging by their sides. Life went on, with or without their reconciliation. But for the first time, Claire felt like she had a choice. She wasn't trapped by expectations or weighed down by someone else's dreams. She could build something new, whether Lucas was part of it or not. "I'm not sure yet," she said honestly, "but I think we need to figure that out separately." Lucas swallowed hard, his throat tightening as he nodded. "You're probably right." They sat in silence for a moment longer before Claire stood, slipping on her coat and adjusting the strap of her purse. "I wish you the best, Lucas. I really do." He looked up at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of longing and acceptance. "And I wish you the same." As she walked out of the cafe, the cold air nipped at her cheeks, but Claire didn't mind. She felt lighter, as if the burden she had carried for years had finally lifted. She wasn't running away from anything anymore. She was walking towards something new. The street was alive with possibility, and for the first time in a long time, Claire felt ready to embrace it. Lucas remained at the table, staring into his half-empty cup of coffee. The woman he had known, the woman he had underestimated, was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone he admired deeply but no longer fully understood. And maybe, he thought, that was okay. He finished his coffee, stood, and left the cafe, the city swallowing him whole as he stepped into the morning bustle. There was work to be done, a life to rebuild. But as he walked away, Lucas knew one thing for sure. He would never make the same mistake again. Because the next time he saw Claire, he wanted to be a man who deserved to be in her world, not someone struggling to catch up.